My name is Jen Yerokis, and I work as a director in microdrama or vertical drama production. I work in Los Angeles, but I'm also fostering relationships for productions in Paris, France, and other parts of the European Union.
And how did you first get involved in short drama industry?
A friend of mine who is an actor and a producer, Casey Esser, he actually had hired me to be a intimacy choreographer on a couple of his dramas that he had been working on. And then a friend of mine who's a DP who had been introduced to vertical dramas had recommended me as a director to Net Shorts. And that's how I got introduced as a director into the vertical world.
The first time you shoot short drama, what's the difference between shooting short dramas and long form like TV series or films?
I think the biggest difference is the size of the crew, which is much smaller on a vertical or on a short drama, and also the speed at which we shoot. You have much more time on a feature film or a television show than you do on a short drama series.
Short drama and how we defined it, and what do you think its essence?
I'm pitching the idea of short dramas or verticals. What I usually reference for people is either the South American telenovela or the United States soap opera genre. I kind of think that what I'm experiencing with short dramas is that it really is become a place to resurrect this particular type of genre, which is a soap opera or a telenovela, which is romance. It's over the top, it's dialogue driven. And for me, the essence of it is just pure, unadulterated fun. I don't look to short dramas to bring me, really deep, complex storytelling or, mind-blowingly beautiful cinematic imagery. I really look at them as really fun, cheeky, if you know what that term means. It's like poking fun at itself in a way. Just fun, romantic interaction between over-the-top characters. That's how I look at microdramas.
Is there any difference between microdrama or verticals and soap operas?
Well, I think soap operas, the main difference is that soap operas, again, you get a little bit more time to shoot. Also, I think the storylines in soap operas are more complex and drawn out because you have, back in the day when soap operas were a really big genre in the United States, you would have a storyline that could carry on for 10 or 15 years. They just shoot every day because it's a daily, you would watch the soap opera every day. You'd watch a half-hour episode, sometimes 1 hour. And it could go on for years if people fell in love with the characters. It just was never ending. Whereas with microdramas or verticals, you're talking about an episode that's only 2 or 3 minutes, and it's got a finite finishing point. So you'll shoot for 100 pages, and that'll be divided up, and that's the end of those characters. That's it. Those to me are the differences.
About creation, what are some common script issues? Because you will receive many scripts. Some common issues that you often need to fix or adjust during production or before the production.
Localization is a big issue. The scripts are oftentimes not written by someone in the country that the drama is going to be streaming for. So we look at how each character speaks, what their language is, the types of phrases that they will use, the colloquialisms that they will use, and we'll try to maintain the structure because the companies always want us to maintain a certain structure, but within that structure, I'll try to individualize each character's voice based on the city that they're supposed to be living in, or based on their class level, or based on, something very specific in their character. So that's really one of the biggest that we face is finding ways to hold the structure the way the company wants the structure, but to find individual voices for the characters that are unique and speak to where they are living and what they are doing in their lives. And then the other big issue that we're starting to see is that there is in microdrama a type of misogyny that's really playing out that maybe is getting pushed too far right now. I think there's a lot of people who are writing about microdramas right now that are pointing that out that maybe we look at other storylines other than, for example, there's one storyline that currently circulated where, a woman was attacked in a way that the vertical drama community kind of pointed out was maybe going too far with the misogyny, and maybe we need to pull back from that a little bit, like still enjoy the fun of the heteronormative romance, but maybe not get into like hurting women unnecessarily. So that's been a recent issue that I've noticed that has come up that I think they're discussing and trying to find a way to fix.
More like a shock value, they were just saying.
Yeah, it is. It's really like a shock value, and it's really necessary to the story. Like you could write something a little bit more interesting that wasn't so hurtful to the female gender.
Have you received any script from local writers, like English writers, original script? Any issue that need to be fixed or improvement?
Well, I think with local writers, and I've written some scripts myself, and one of the challenges that we face as American writers, I can't speak to South American writers or, I can speak to French writers and some of the European writers as well, is that we tend to want the stories to be more complex and the dialogue to be less, and this is a very American term, on the nose, which means when you write a line and the character doesn't have any subtext behind it, usually we refer to that as something that's being really on the nose. It's just really obvious. And in American writing, and I think in a lot of European writing, we like to have a lot of subtext so the character doesn't always say exactly what they mean and you discover what they mean later on in the story. So I think Western writers need to remember that because you're viewing the vertical in 2 to 4 minute increments, sometimes you do need to be on the nose because somebody might have missed an episode. Also, the writing needs to be a little bit repetitive in case, again, somebody missed a bunch of episodes and they're hopping in on the middle for some reason. They need to know where they are in the story. So that's something that I feel the scripts that I'm getting from the Asian American community and the Asian businesses, they're really good at kind of copying that soap opera dialogue rhythm where it is a little bit repetitive because you're creating stories for people, for audiences that aren't necessarily watching it in chronological order or watching the whole thing. Maybe they're just watching a piece of it. So they need to be kind of reminded of where they are in the story process. So I think for me, to sum that up, sorry, that was a very long-winded answer. Western writers need to lean into the style of the repetition a little bit and the style of it being a little bit obvious in the text. And maybe some of the writing that I'm seeing from the Asian American, or sorry, the Asian companies, maybe they could be just a little more complex in the in the dialogue. Maybe there's something in the middle where each culture could learn from each other and maybe make it just a little bit more interesting rather than so repetitive, which is a lot of what the microdrama is right now, is very, very repetitive.
You're writing your own script. So for someone who is from maybe film or TV background, or maybe write novels, who want to write short dramas, verticals, what's your suggestion to them?
Don't take it too seriously. Have fun. Like, it's a fun genre. Like, last night I was thinking about our interview and our conversation, and I was thinking, how would I describe it? And I would describe it like, like cheap candy. Like, we know when you buy a little bag of cheap candy, that it's going to be a little too sweet. It's not going to necessarily be the healthiest thing that you're going to buy, but you're going to really enjoy it, right? Like we all sometimes crave that little of junk food, and we love it for exactly what it is. We're not trying to turn junk food into broccoli, and I think for traditional writers, have fun with a genre, embrace the structure, because the structure is repetitive for a very good reason. It's part of what helps it sell on with the algorithms. And then just make it the best you can within that structure, and remember who your audience is. Your audience is not sitting down to watch, a Steven Spielberg movie. They're sitting down to watch something that's just fun and can help them experience a little bit of escapism.
When you mention about structure, how can a writer know about structure
I think you
too?
have to read scripts. You have to ask your friends who've worked on microdramas, can I please read one of your scripts so that I can see how they pace the script to fit into that tiny, tiny episode. That took me a while to learn how to write. Like, I remember my first microdrama that I wrote, it was very filmic. And I had to go back and just think, okay, I need to have every episode break happen every couple of pages. And that is a certain skill. And it takes time. You have to practice it, and to maintain the level of drama that you need to maintain in order to keep your audience interested. I think it's a great exercise. It kind of reminds me of like when film directors like were learning how to. This was a long time ago when film directors, were shooting commercials as kind of their practice to learn how to make feature films. When you shoot a commercial, you have 30 to 45 seconds to tell a story, right? That's a style skill. And I think microdramas are the same thing. You have to really read the scripts and practice writing in this particular rhythm and this particular scene break structure.
Or maybe they watch the full episode, full
You could
series.
watch, yeah, I mean, I think you should watch it as well. I mean, I did when I first offered the opportunity to direct a microdrama. That was the first thing I did, was immediately started watching them, because I knew what they were because I had choreographed a lot of sex scenes for them, but I hadn't really taken a deep dive into what 110 pages of a one series feels like to watch it all the way through. And that is a completely different experience, than just hopping in for a few days to, help the actors deal with the intimacy. Very different experience. So definitely watch them.
Actually, when me and my writer, editor in chief, we kind of do the breakdown. So we write down the first episode, what's in the first episode, write down second, and then like 65 episodes, and we know the whole structure. It's like a practice.
Yeah, it is. It's being in high school when you first learn how to write an essay, they have you write down a bullet point list of what's the arc of your essay, right? I never thought I would say this, but yeah, I mean, I think we all did that in school, where you learned how to write a few pages and you did that bullet breakdown and you said, I start here and then I go here. It's the same thing. My high school teachers will be very proud if they watch this interview.
What's the core element you always make sure bring out from script to screen?
For me, the core element is really, why are these characters here? Why are they here? Because I think if you can really dial in on the why, it gives the characters a reason to come back for each episode, and it gives your audience a reason to want to see what they're going to do next based on their why. As a character, am I here? Why do I keep coming back to this story? I remember when I was younger and I was at Cal Arts, and I was an acting student at Cal Arts. And one of my teachers said, if you don't have a why for why a character is there, then there's no reason for you to be on stage. You might as well just walk off stage. You always have to have a why. Why is character staying in the room and dealing with what they're dealing with right now?
Hi, this is Maggie Han. Want to write short drama but feel like you can't because you are not a filmmaker? The truth is, short drama can be learned. And in China, where the short drama market makes over 7 billion US dollar a year, a lot of hits actually come from everyday people. In my course, Short Drama Writing 101, I will show you the method. One protagonist, one main task, one simple storyline. You can preview the lesson for free and start creating with us. Oh, I saw you said it's like a candy, short drama, vertical like a candy. So the ending has to be always sweet or as a candy. Is any other feelings like sorrow or bitter?
Well, yeah, I mean, ultimately your characters go through all of the roller coaster of emotions. That's why they're so fun. Like we see the character wants something, has a desire, but then and they close to getting it, but then they don't get it. Something interacts, something interrupts them, and something hurts them. But then we see them have the opportunity to achieve that goal again, but then something bad happens. And I think that's why, these stories are so fun to watch because it's like on a roller coaster. You go up and you go down, you go up and you go down, and then by the end, it's such a wonderful relief when you get to the end and the character finally gets what they want.
And how do you control pacing of a vertical from directing or post-production perspective?
I think the pacing has to do with looking at those highs and lows and figuring out, emotionally, how do you uphill fast at this moment, or are you climbing slow? And are you going downhill slow, or are you going downhill fast? I think that's a really big part of the pacing, is making decisions about when you're going up, when you're going down, and what's the pace of going up and down in the emotional arc of each episode. And I think that that really helps. If you know that in advance, you plan that in advance, then I think you'll have a really nice rhythm to your storytelling.
Do you think there should be a emotional ups and down in every episode?
You definitely have to have a cliffhanger, right? Like you have to have a feeling of urgency to know what's going to happen next. But that's not necessarily the same thing as up and down emotionally, right? Those two different things. Sometimes they're the same thing, but sometimes not. So I think you're thinking about where your character is in each episode is important, but also then asking yourself at the end of this episode why the audience needs to come back, and making sure that you're creating a very full emotional moment for them to want to come back and see what's going to happen next.
How do you create emotional resonance with the audience?
Depending on how well my actors are and how well we work together. The actors are the people who really bring, that gift of emotion and that gift of being a vessel for the audience, to come in and feel this emotion with them. And then visually with my camera, if I can see a camera movement or a camera angle that will help amplify that emotion, then that's what we do. And that's like the biggest part of the collaboration, is the emotion that the actor brings, and then the camera amplifying that emotion. That's really how you at that place. It's not something that one person does. Like, to me, that's really where it gets really collaborative for us.
And right now, I found out in North America, short drama is still dominated by CEO romance stories. And what type of stories do you think could be explored and why?
I think the romance is a really big part of why it's successful, because again, I do feel like the short drama style, that genre, is really a place for the soap opera genre to come back and kind of have a resurgence. So I do think the romance is actually a really big part of the success. I think looking at different types of characters to experience romance could be a place where they could broaden it. I think the CEO trope is really fun and wonderful, but I think there are other romance characters that are just as fun and could be explored. I know there's been some exploration with some like horror type of a short. I think horror is a really fun place. I think action also is a really fun space. And then maybe finding romance somewhere in there. I mean, even when you look at like sitcoms, if you wanted to do something that's comic, if you look at traditional sitcom structure, there's always some kind of budding romance that never really gets realized in a sitcom. So I think romance is just, chemistry between characters, the possibility of romance. I think that that's a big part of storytelling in general. I don't microdramas be successful without, the romance angle. I do think a big part of what the audiences are tuning in for. But it would be fun to explore. I mean, it would be really fun to do something that's, just over the top comedy. It would be really fun to do something that is maybe mystery, something that aesthetic for a mystery. I would watch documentaries in the short format. That's actually something I would watch because sometimes I don't have time to sit down and watch a whole like hour and a half documentary. I don't think that that will ever happen. I think that might be too boring for the short drama world, but I would watch it just because again, that's something you could divide up very easily into 1 to 3 minute increments where people are taking in information on their work break, or on the metro or wherever they are in the world. I'm excited to see if microdramas how far they can push outside of that romance aesthetic.
Actually, in China, we're half male-oriented stories and half female-oriented stories. So, in my opinion, there's still half genre hasn't been explored, especially for male audiences.
Interesting. Yeah, true. Because the main audience, what I understand, is female.
I am also curious about the intimacy coordinator. So, did you see any changes in the past like 2 to 3 years?
I think at first, maybe the companies didn't know that intimacy position that could be filled, and it's nice to see that more companies, more producers are bringing a coordinator on. If the intimate scenes are requiring some more time and attention. I think it's always nice to have your actors feel safe and protected because then they always give you more. The safer the more willing they are to take chances for you. So I always think that's and it's the same thing with stunt coordinators for the exploring more stunt physical drama. You have a coordinator because you want people to be safe. You want to know that it's okay perform the actions that they're performing and that God, if somebody were to get hurt or have a problem, that there would be a professional there who could handle it and protect the actors but also protect the entire production and help everybody get back on track and feeling safe again.
As a woman, do you feel you have certain advantages in short drama industry? If yes, what are they?
Well, if the main audience is female, I mean, I think that's the biggest advantage of being a female director is that it might be a little bit more intuitive for me to tap into what the audience will think is interesting. It's not to say that men don't have that sensitivity, but I do think, if you've been a woman, you know what's interesting to women. I don't pit women against men. I mean, I think it's, are you talented? Are you good at planning your shots? Are you good at executing them? Are you good at communicating and bringing out the best of your crew and your actors? To me, that's the most important thing on set. They have so time that as a director, you have to be somebody that can really the emotion out of them and somebody that can really communicate effectively where people need to go and what people need to do so that you can do things quickly.
As a woman, have you encountered any challenges while working in short drama industry?
I personally haven't. I don't know if anybody's done statistics on if there are more male directors than female directors, if, women are having trouble getting their foot in the door. I haven't even looked at those statistics. I've been just focusing on, creating work for myself that I haven't really taken a lot of time to look at the gender, if there are gender disparity issues, which maybe I should take some time to look at that and see if there are.
From my observation, in China's short drama industry, it's still more male directors than female directors. And of course, there's so many male oriented stories. I interview different creators in North America, or is mostly in North America. It's more female creators, directors, producers. I think this time in interview, 70% are females actually. So
Oh, well,
it's a
that's great.
yeah, it's open doors for women. So, from your observation, do you think the way female leads are portrayed in short dramas has any issues or areas for improvement?
Yeah, I think that takes us back to the conversation about misogyny and
Mm.
sexism. I mean, I do think that a way to execute a romance story without the women being a victim, or without the woman's happiness being solely dependent on the success of the romance that's in question. I shot one where our lead female character was actually the more dominant, more powerful person. And what was great about her character is that you got the sense that she didn't need the man at the end, that she wanted him, that it wasn't about needing him, but it was about wanting him. And that to me is, I think we could look to make more of the scripts lean in that direction, rather than the woman being victimized.
If you were to create a female character for a vertical drama, what kind of woman will she be?
I'd love to see like a female character who's like imperfect and a little klutzy, most of the characters that I've seen, they're just so polished, or they're like, Cinderella, where, she's, really beaten down and poor or whatever. And it could be fun to a female character who is, financially stable, but maybe awkward, and, maybe part of her growth into herself is navigating through that awkwardness or that klutziness. There's some sort of, she's not perfect, but she's also not desperate.
Right now, you live between US and France, right? Did you shoot
Yeah.
any short dramas in France? Or
So that's what I'm working on right now. I'm fingers crossed, very close to being able to do that. My biggest hurdle in that has been educating the corporate companies on the cost of doing short dramas here, and helping them understand that budgets in Europe are more favorable to them. There are plenty of English speaking actors here, and that it's maybe not as difficult as it might seem and not as expensive as it might seem, particularly in a city like Paris, France, where I am right now. So that's where we're at with that right now, is really trying to, help vertical companies understand the concept of tax incentives and how they could save money through tax incentives, through digital creator incentives that exist in Europe, which lower the budget for them, but also the fact that we don't have unions here, so you don't have to pay a lot of the exorbitant fees that you have to pay in the United States. Those don't exist here because the governments take care of their actors and their crew members' living needs and health needs in a different way, in different structure than the United States does. So that's been my process here of just educating vertical companies on how it can be economically feasible to do them here. And you get, the more opulent locations, because historically the buildings are just more opulent and older. There's a whole world of romance to internationally, that they haven't explored yet. And one day, getting them to push into different languages. French is the second most spoken language in the world, so why wouldn't you consider that as a location and possibly a language? So that's been my process, and fingers crossed, in the new year I'll be able to produce and direct some of those here in the European Union.
how do you see the future of short dramas?
I really see them continuing to grow, and I really see the film industry really embracing it as its own genre. It's not a replacement for film, it's not a replacement for TV. And I hope that we expand out to things, comedies and maybe reality TV series. I've been to reality series in the microdrama sphere because I think it works well in that short episode format. Documentaries, it just would be really lovely to see it continue to grow and expand into, maybe the audiences are not as huge as romance, but they are significant enough to create space for that. Here's a great place for microdramas to expand. I think right now the size of the cast in the so big, and a lot of those cast members are really not pivotal to the story arc. I actually am pitching a microdrama of like kind of like an Emily in Paris copy, like spoof here, and maybe we only have, five characters maximum, so that helps keep your budget more manageable and could really tease out the relationship between those five people rather than having, 15 characters and most of them are only saying one or two lines, right? Like, to me, that's just on the US side in terms of financing. That's kind of a waste of money because you have to pay all those people to sit around all day and say one line. So maybe that's a place where microdrama writing could improve is like smaller cast, which maybe gives you a deeper storyline, gives you more room to explore more deeper emotions with those characters.
Sometimes when I develop scripts, I need to go through all the characters they design. Sometimes just say, can we keep this? Can we combine those into one? Yeah.
Yeah.